transportation revolution, aka Claire buys a car. This is Energy Matters with Claire and Dan.
This is going to be so much fun, Claire. I got so many questions for you today. But first, to set the stage, before we get into any energy-specific stuff, tell me the conditions under which you are now going to buy a car.
So, my 15-year-old son and I got in a car accident several weeks ago in our Prius Prime, our 2021 Prius Prime. It was not my fault. Somebody drove into our lane. I will say that it's a very safe car. Our airbags were, unloaded, and we all were able to walk out, and I'm very, very grateful for that. But yes, my family and I are in the market for a new car, and we have a couple requirements. One is that my husband fits in it, and he's 6'5". Two is that it fits in my parking pad, and we live in a row home in Federal Hill, so that is not, the easiest feat. And three, that it is either a hybrid or an electric vehicle.
So first, I get to say the quote that has become popular in, I guess, social media these days, and that is, thank goodness you guys are all okay, and you guys should have gotten out of the car and say, stay in your lane, dude.
No.
But I guess that wasn't your response when this accident happened with the crisis. So yeah. You said a bunch of interesting things, and the size of your husband, the parking space, they seem to be going in opposite directions. But let me get the basics. Yeah. Tell me why, whether it's personal choice, lifestyle, do one up on your neighbors, do one down to your neighbors, you decided to look at hybrids and EVs only.
Yeah, so depending on which side of the aisle you're on, many people think I'm an idiot for getting a hybrid as opposed to a fully electric vehicle.
That'd be me. I'm in that category.
Okay. Well, we had this Prius Prime, a 2021 Prius Prime. We ended up paying $19,000 for it after rebates and all that good stuff. Of course, now in 2025, after September 30th, all of those rebates have gone away. We loved our hybrid. It really, when you think about buying a car, have to think about how many people are traveling with you, the distances you're traveling, the part of the country you're in, all of that good stuff. So we live in Baltimore, and typically we're going to pick up a kid from soccer or drop off a kid to something else or go to the Costco. So our Prius Prime, our little Prius Prime with 9 gallons of gas, we would get 100 miles per gallon on our car, because most of our trips were small little trips to and from here and there.
So Claire, you said that you were really interested in hybrids, and I have nothing against hybrid except, in my view, dragging around a combustion engine and your electric battery sounds like a horrifically inefficient use of whatever. But that's your choice, and this episode is Claire buys a car. But I did just drive cross country as I moved from California to Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. And I drove across in my personal car, which, to be totally transparent, is a Tesla Model 3 and has the big bumper sticker saying, I bought this before he knew he went crazy, which is maybe a too weak excuse, but that's the excuse. And I drove through many, many red states intentionally, and I had no problem not only charging, but also supercharging. In small towns, I actually went to a ZZ Top revival concert in Texas, and I charged up outside of that ZZ Top concert, where I got to listen to all the classics, Sharp Dressed Man and others. And what I saw were very large EVs. I saw the Tesla Monstrosity. I saw the Ford 150 Lightning. There were EVs everywhere. And so my question comes back to you. I have nothing against your choice, but when you say a hybrid is less expensive, that's actually not what my friend Professor Jessica Transick in the School of Data Science and Brain Science at MIT wrote in a really interesting, super well animated article in the New York Times in 2021, and we'll share the link on energymatters.world, where she found that the cost of ownership for EVs way back in 2021 was lower than that for hybrids.
So that's really interesting. So let's go back to the New York Times for just a moment, because the New York Times also had a really good interactive article about the EV chargers road trip and underscored exactly what you just said, which is that fast charging stations in the U.S. have soared in number from around 1,000 a decade ago to 12,000 today. And despite the Trump administration's active hostility towards EVs and its attempts to end federal funding for public chargers, the private sector is taking the slack, and there are still new stations going up, 2,000 so far this year. The thing that I think it's really worth reading. And again, we will post this article on energymatters.world. Take a look and send some comments. Fast chargers are key to an EV road trip, right? Because they can fill up a car in around a half hour. Part of the reason I've been thinking about hybrids is they really do seem cheaper. Like, I guess I'm going to have to go back and look at that article. But we bought our Prius Prime for $19,000, which is kind of hard to beat. I can't imagine. And so, yes, we are looking for a car, and we looked at the Kia Niro. And even that, which I would argue is a very small car, the MSRP is $42,000.
That's the manufacturer's suggested retail price.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And of course, they do want you to use their financing, and they'll give you a discount and blah, 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 blah. But $19,000 versus $42,000, I guess what you're talking about is the lifetime value of the car, right?
Well, no, not even the lifetime, actually the short ownership time. So in this article that Professor Jessica Transick put together, she found that even if you're only looking at a relatively short window, because the lifetime of a car is not the time period at which many people own their car. You might own for 3 or 5 or 7 years, but the car might last much longer, that EVs were cheaper. And furthermore, having just been back from visiting the VinFast company in Vietnam, they make EVs of all sizes, from tiny town cars to big SUVs. And yes, my lab does have one of their big SUVs, so that's truth in advertising. They are now selling a 4-seat town EV with 120-mile range for $8,900.
In the United States?
It is just being licensed here now.
Okay.
And so there's an opportunity, but also Tata Energy Motors from India also has their version in the same price range. And so I am never, would I say, that, my business savvy, economist believing co-partner in this whole effort, Claire, is ever not up with the latest data, but it sure looks to me a dreamy-eyed Californian. Of course, in California, we have 201,000 charging stations. And in China, they have 12 million charging stations. Now, California has about 2.2 million EVs, and China just eclipsed 30 million EVs.
And how many are in the entire United States?
So that number I don't have at the tip of my tongue. I'm going to guess it is roughly 5 million, but I'm sure some of our listeners will prove us wrong with a more accurate number, but my estimate would be 5 to 6 million in the US.
Okay, so I'm going to be skeptical here for a minute. So 2 questions I have back to you is that my understanding is EVs generally have a larger initial carbon footprint than internal combustion engines vehicles because of the energy intensive process of manufacturing the lithium ion batteries. So explain to me why I'm being a good environmentalist by buying an EV. Let's not talk hybrids versus EVs right now, but just an EV at all. Explain to me why it's better as an environmentalist to buy this larger initial carbon footprint than an internal combustion engine.
So this is so cool. And I recognize that, Claire, you have managed to distract me from interrogating you on your car choice, but it's so much fun. So first of all, my number of about 5 million EVs in the US is correct, as confirmed by a AI system I will not identify by name over the air. But the reason why the EVs are in general better, but you can, as you're highlighting, you can do worse than the carbon footprint of your conventional gas-powered vehicle, which we call ICE, an internal combustion engine car, versus an EV, is that car manufacturers want to sell you cars that have more range because they think that will reduce range anxiety. So you tend to buy bigger than you need because it sounds like a good thing to do. And that means a higher sticker price, that MSRP number you highlighted before. But the interesting feature is that over the last several years, a number of very prominent electric vehicle manufacturers, including VW and including Tesla, have switched away from lithium-ion batteries, which is in your laptop and your phone. They have shifted to lithium phosphate batteries with very slightly poorer performance. But the big difference is that lithium phosphate does not involve cobalt, which is certainly one of the worst offenders in terms of a critical material that's bad for the planet. Not that the material is, but the way we extract it's bad for the planet, largely from the Democratic Republic of Congo. 70% of current cobalt comes from there. And because a lot of that mining is done by small illegal operations, a lot of those mines use child labor. And so there are multiple negatives. But as we look at this new wave of lithium phosphate, which is not the end of the line, it's just the next innovation, we already see that the carbon footprint of those electric vehicles is not that different than gas vehicles. And then when you include just a few months of use.
Well, that's what I thought you were going to say, right?
Nope, I was saving that for the end.
Okay.
See? Because
the incremental carbon footprint for an EV versus an internal combustion engine car would be in the range of 2.8 to 6.3 tons, as I understand it, of carbon dioxide per vehicle, and that this upfront carbon debt is typically quickly paid back once the vehicle's driven, especially in regions with low carbon electricity.
Right. So two ways to think about that. One is that if you drive an electric vehicle in a state with very clean energy, say California or Washington or Vermont, then in that case, that electric vehicle, that same exact vehicle, is getting about twice the equivalent mile per gallon, but we're not using gallons, as that same vehicle would in a very coal-intensive state like Wyoming or Indiana. So same vehicle, different electricity makes you get a big difference. But I think that the way that I tend to tell my students is that when you see a gas-powered vehicle driving around, a good rule of thumb is that over the course of 1 year of average driving, kind of 8 to 11,000 miles a year, your internal combustion car is going to emit about its own weight in carbon.
Right. That's
and
bananas.
You get a tiny number from your electric vehicle, and it's really only a function of what we call the carbon intensity of electricity. And that's something that this article by Jessica Trantic just nails.
Okay, we'll have to go back and look at it. Another visual that I thought was really helpful is a 20-mile drive, just a regular 20-mile drive in a regular car, not an electric vehicle, releases 10 pounds of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which would take one tree 6 months to recapture. So, I think that is it's just from an environmental perspective, we should all be sitting where we are and doing Zoom calls for the rest of our life. Right?
Okay, so now I'm going to pull this topic back to what I really want to tease you about, and that is the Claire buys a car story. So I know your son, and your son got to drive around on my e-bike provided by VinFast and seemed to like it quite a bit.
Yep.
And so I thought one of your criteria was going to be when my son gets his driving license, I want to be able to say that he is from the new generation and will never be a driver of a gas-powered car, because I'm going to move him into the world of the electrify everything, clean energy future, unless he becomes a farmer. And then tractors and things are probably going to be slower to convert than others, although there's effort there too.
There's effort there too, right.
But correct me, because I'm sure I'm wrong about all that.
No, not at all. I mean, we are going to buy an electric vehicle of some kind or a hybrid of some kind. I think one of the things I wanted to talk with you about, because I actually don't have the answer to this question, is a huge part of the discussion, at least when we talk about batteries to generate electricity, is what batteries are available on the supply chain and what's going to be available soon relative to foreign entities of concern and, where you're able to buy your batteries from. What's the answer to that?
So this is super exciting and definitely ties a lot of stuff we have talked about and we'll talk about together. So I already mentioned that this push into lithium phosphate didn't come from some great environmental movement. It came from easier, more secure, and lower cost supply chains than the cobalt that's needed in lithium ion batteries. So lithium phosphate,
and less likely to catch on fire. Let's be clear.
That is true, although I believe that issue is overblown, but let's leave that for another episode. There have been a very few high-profile cars catching on fire, but there have been some, so I don't want to dismiss it. And certainly when you get told when you get on an airplane that your battery needs to be not in your compartment with you because of that, that's an issue. But lithium phosphate is just the first of a new wave. There's a whole range of solid state batteries, and again, just in China, and it's an example of markets of which the current US administration is cutting itself out of. I saw huge billboards in multiple airports saying batteries from a certain company, one particular provider is CATL, and the CATL battery can recharge 300 miles of range in 10 minutes. And now there's a new competitor out that says they can recharge to their solid state battery 1,000 miles of range in 2 minutes.
Damn.
You can't even get to the bathroom and back in 2 minutes, let alone do your business there.
But are we going to be able to see this technology in the United States?
They're already for sale in China. They're already for sale in France. No. But I mean, but the fact that in the U.S. we are trying to keep these foreign companies out and slow down the rate of innovation. The answer is yes. We already have lithium phosphate batteries for sale in the U.S. in Teslas, in VWs, et cetera. But what we do not have, because the U.S. is choosing to shoot itself in the foot or the tire or whatever you want to say, is that we are leaving the exciting cutting edge of many technologies, electric vehicles included, to our overseas competitors because this administration seems to be afraid of competition.
Right. And the punchline is EVs produce much less carbon pollution than gas and diesel vehicles on a per mile basis, on a life cycle basis. And that's from the Environmental Protection Agency. And we will post those links on energymatters.world. But that, transportation is the leading emissions sector in the United States and the largest emitter in lots of states. EVs produce less emissions per mile when charged up from the grid, particularly depending on where you are. If you're in New England, it's cleaner. Maryland has a lot of nuclear. It's cleaner. So, without battery electric vehicles or plug-in hybrid vehicles, the average real world per mile emissions or fuel economy of new vehicles would have barely changed in the past 10 years. And
this
really
is crazy because innovation means we could do so much better. And I guess the thing that irks me from a economic perspective, not the sustainability perspective, is that electric vehicles are also massively cheaper to own and operate. They require far less maintenance. There's no issue that has been recorded in terms of this early fear that somehow the battery is going to need replaced often. And the cost to operate a electric vehicle can be a third or less the cost to operate a same size, same weight gas-powered vehicle. So we are denying higher reliability, lower cost to American consumers because some people in the US seem to have this aversion or allergy to this new technology. And by the way, not that I want my local state trooper to know, but I unfortunately received my worst speeding tickets by zipping along at a very, very healthy speed in my EV, far faster than I could ever go in any gas-powered car I've ever owned. So Claire, I got to ask to wrap this episode up because eventually we're going to want to see a picture of what you do. But what are your favorites and why? And doesn't mean have to be brand. It has to be what's interesting to you now in this space.
So we just can't buy a Tesla. We just aren't going to do it. We're just simply not going to do it.
I think you're right on the money there, or right on the lack of money, or whatever you want to call it.
The Ioniqs are very cute.
No trillionaires, no kings.
No trillionaires, no kings. That's right. I do like the Ioniq. It's actually a pretty car. I'm a big fan of the Kia, the Niro. I I still like my Prius Prime, the Toyota Prius Prime. It's a hybrid. You haven't really convinced me about a hybrid versus an EV.
Well, you already said that you never take any advice I give you. So this is exactly par for the course, and I'm loving it.
Though I am thrilled to see in all of my brethren in the EV space, the fact that there are fast chargers everywhere. We could do a whole episode to explain to people who have an electric vehicle, what is the actual charge and how do you compare the charge of filling up your tank at $3 a gallon versus 24 cents a kilowatt hour. That's confusing enough, right?
Well, let me give you one closing kind of thing that I saw on the ground in Singapore. I saw a whole row of electric vehicles in a parking lot, and a drone robot drove around the ground. It was shaped like a pancake, and it went and drove under each EV and asked the owner via text, "Do you want me to charge you up?" Just like your electric toothbrush doesn't actually connect. And you had to type yes or no on your phone, and it asked you for a credit card number, and then it charged your car up. And these drones drove around, and now I've seen that if you go on YouTube, you can find pictures of these drones, and they have two applications. One is they go and they charge your car, and then I saw a quite scarier picture of a similar looking drone that was used to steal a car.
Ooh.
And it drove under a car, it lifted it up, and it drove it away. So there's a good side and a bad side of technology lurking out there from my perspective.
Wow. That's
We'll put the link in to that YouTube as well.
Okay, that sounds great. So, the conversation continues, but we obviously on Energy Matters care a lot about electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles. And we are hoping that there's lots more opportunity. And certainly now with fast chargers all over the country, it's much easier to drive that EV. So thanks so much for listening. This is Energy Matters with Claire and
Dan.